In 2024, a quiet revolution reached its climax. China's BYD overtook Tesla to become the world's largest electric car maker. A Chinese brand now sets the pace for the global auto industry. For the West, it was a jolt. For decades, China was dismissed as the land of cheap toys, but suddenly, Beijing was not only catching up, it was leading in the industries of the future: solar power, wind turbines, electric vehicles. Over 80% of the world's solar panels are now made in China. And in the last year alone, China installed more renewable energy than some continents have in total. So how did this happen? How did a country once trapped in poverty turn into the clean energy superpower of the 21st century? Back in 2015, when Beijing unveiled its Made in China 2025 blueprint, most people outside the country barely paid attention. To many in the West, it sounded like another empty slogan, a state trying to copy Germany's Industry 4.0 but without the innovation to back it up. Behind the jargon, Made in China 2025, was a declaration of war, an economic one. It identified 10 industries of the future, from robotics and aerospace to electric vehicles, solar power. And unlike most governments that set lofty goals, China didn't just write a plan. Factories were built at breathtaking speed, state-owned banks poured in low-interest loans, and billions in subsidies flowed directly to manufacturers. To outsiders, this looked like market distortion, even cheating. But to Beijing, it was strategy. The goal was never just to compete, it was to dominate. By creating an industrial ecosystem too big to fail, China ensured that even its weaker companies could survive long enough to push innovation forward. Chinese companies were scaling up with government backing, investing heavily in research, and driving prices down worldwide. It transformed China from a low-cost manufacturer into the undisputed powerhouse of clean energy. For most of the late 20th century, China's economy was built on what officials called the Bold Three: clothing, furniture, and home appliances. Cheap, labor-intensive goods that filled Western stores with "Made in China" labels. But fast forward to today, and those industries have been replaced by a new trinity: electric vehicles, solar panels, and batteries. The new three are not just products, they're the foundation of the global clean energy economy. And China controls them like no other country on earth. Take solar. More than 80% of the world's solar panels are made in China. In 2023 alone, China added more solar capacity than the United States has ever installed in its entire history. That's not just leadership, that's near monopoly. Then there's wind. Roughly 60% of the world's turbines come from Chinese factories. These aren't low-quality knockoffs. They're increasingly advanced, cheaper, and the real crown jewel: batteries. Two companies, CATL and BYD, control over half the global market for EV batteries. Together, they supply not just Chinese automakers, but also foreign brands, meaning even Western electric cars often depend on Chinese power. And of course, there are the electric vehicles themselves. What makes this transformation even more striking is how deliberate it was. China didn't stumble into clean energy, it pivoted into it. But there's a dark side to this story. The very system that pushed China to the top of the clean energy world is now creating a problem too big to ignore: overcapacity. In industry after industry, China has built more factories than its own people, or even the world, can possibly consume. In the electric car sector alone, Chinese automakers now have the capacity to produce nearly 3 times as many EVs as their domestic market can handle. The result? A brutal price war. Companies slash margins just to survive. Some collapse under debt. And when domestic demand isn't enough, the surplus spills abroad. Europe has been flooded with Chinese electric cars sold at rock-bottom prices. Solar panels are exported in such massive volumes that they undercut competitors before they can even break even. To Western manufacturers, this isn't competition, it's a knockout punch. Factories in the US and Europe can't keep up with goods sold below production cost. Governments accuse Beijing of dumping products onto global markets, artificially cheap thanks to state subsidies. The backlash has already begun. The United States has imposed tariffs as high as 145% on Chinese clean energy imports. The European Union has launched anti-subsidy investigations and slapped duties on EVs and solar panels. Here's the irony: these protectionist moves don't just hit China, they hit the world's clean energy transition. Tariffs make solar panels and electric cars more expensive, slowing down the very shift away from fossil fuels that climate scientists say is urgent. To understand China's clean energy empire, we need to rewind nearly half a century, back to the late 1970s. When Mao Zedong died in 1976, China was poor. Decades of rigid central planning planning. Failed campaigns like the Great Leap Forward and the political chaos of the Cultural Revolution had left the country stuck in poverty. Then came Deng Xiaoping. Unlike Mao, Deng was a pragmatist. His motto was simple: ideology didn't matter, results did. In 1978, he launched the famous reform and opening up policies. The results were explosive. Factories sprang up, first producing cheap textiles, shoes, and toys for export. Millions of rural migrants poured into booming coastal cities, fueling what would become the largest industrial workforce on Earth. By the 1990s, China was already earning the title the world's factory. The real turbocharge came in 2001 when China joined the World Trade Organization. That one decision plugged Chinese factories directly into global supply chains. For consumers abroad, it meant cheaper electronics, clothing, and everyday goods. For China, it meant massive growth. By 2010, China had overtaken Japan to become the world's second-largest economy. But here's the key: even in those early years, China wasn't satisfied with being just a cheap workshop for the world. Its leaders studied how Japan and South Korea had climbed from low-cost manufacturing into high-tech leadership. They wanted the same, but bigger. And that ambition is what set the stage for the next phase, a deliberate push into clean energy and advanced technology. China's clean energy story isn't finished. In fact, it may just be entering its most ambitious chapter. The next frontier isn't just about producing more solar panels or electric cars. It's about building an entire energy system for the 21st century, one that blends physical infrastructure with digital intelligence. And Beijing isn't stopping there. During its current 5-year plan, China is expected to pour nearly $6 trillion into green and digital infrastructure. For the world, this creates both opportunity and risk. On one hand, China's scale makes clean energy cheaper and more accessible than ever before. On the other hand, it concentrates critical supply chains in a single country, a country already locked in trade battles with much of the world. And then there's the environmental paradox. Building solar panels, wind turbines, and batteries is still energy intensive. The ultimate question is whether China's state-driven model can last. Can an economy built on subsidies, overcapacity, and relentless expansion keep running without collapsing under its own weight? Or has Beijing found the formula for dominating? What's certain is this: China is no longer just the world's factory. It's become the engine room of the clean energy age. And in doing so, it hasn't just reshaped its own destiny, it's reshaping the fate of the entire planet.